I stood in my own dining room, holding a tray of untouched birthday cupcakes, only to see my mother-in-law lighting candles on a chocolate cake. "For Kevin's promotion," she beamed. Applause erupted. No one looked at me. Not even Mark. Someone laughed. "Well, maybe next year, huh?" I quietly walked upstairs, opened my jewelry drawer, and took out the deed to this house. My name, my signature. If they won't remember me in my home, maybe they don't belong in it. Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Comment below. I wasn't always the kind of woman who kept receipts, literal or emotional. I used to believe that if you gave your heart, your time, your home, people would just know how to treat you. Before everything changed, I was a woman rebuilding from the ground up. At 43, I closed on my first house alone, a weathered 2-story colonial with cracked shingles and creaky floors. But it was mine. No help, no cosigner, just years of working late nights, clipping coupons, and reminding myself, you're not too old to start over. I had already survived a loveless first marriage, 13 years of being invisible, 13 birthdays forgotten even while I planned his everyone. When the divorce came, I didn't take much, just my name back, a dented car, and a fierce promise to never let myself shrink again. Then I met Mark. He was warm, sweet, the kind of man who asked about your day and actually listened. We met volunteering at a community garden. I was planting marigolds, he was hauling compost. Our first conversation was about soil types. Our second was about regrets. By the end of the week, he'd brought me homemade peach cobbler. He was a comfort I didn't know I still believed in. The only thing I didn't see coming was how tightly his world wrapped around his family. His mother called every day, sometimes twice. His 2 sisters, Sarah and Liz, treated him like their 3rd child. And the nieces, well, I tried. I really did. I bought them birthday gifts, hosted movie nights, even let one of them borrow my car for college interviews. But there was always a wall. A subtle one. They smiled, nodded, but never included me. They called his ex adorable, and once told me, half laughing, "You're very mature for him." I was 10 years older than Mark. I never lied about it. He said it didn't matter. And I believed him. We got married in the backyard of my home. Small, simple, intimate. I paid for most of it. Didn't mind. Mark moved in with me after the honeymoon. His family dropped comments like, "Nice place. Mark's so lucky to have found someone who'd let him settle in so easily." Let him. As if I was just the landlord of my own life. Still, I bit my tongue. I told myself, they'll come around. Just give them time. The first 2 birthdays we spent together, Mark said he didn't want to make a big deal out of his. Too much pressure, he claimed. So I went along. I baked a cake, got him a gift, and made a quiet dinner. Mine came and went with a card and a distracted, "We should do something soon." The 3rd year, I started to feel it. The quiet void you can't name but know is growing. I would scroll through photos of other women, their families surprising them with dinner or brunch or something. I would tell myself it didn't matter. I was too old to expect balloons. But the truth is, it wasn't about parties or presents. It was about being seen, being remembered, especially by people living under your roof. I had let Mark's family come and go in my home without question. Holidays, long weekends, birthdays, always for someone else. I cooked, cleaned, made up rooms. And each time I told myself, you're being generous. That's a good thing. But generosity without appreciation becomes servitude. And servitude, over time, becomes resentment. One moment that sticks with me. 2 years ago, Mark's niece had a graduation party here. I paid for the food, bought decorations, even made a playlist she liked. At the end of the night, his sister gave Mark a hug and whispered loud enough for me to hear, "Thank you so much for hosting. You've got such a great setup." He didn't correct her. Didn't say, "This is her home." I started keeping quiet after that. Not because I didn't have words, but because I was tired of being the only one speaking truth no one wanted to hear. And then came this birthday. I reminded Mark 2 weeks before, just in passing. Next Friday's my birthday. Should we do something simple? He smiled, kissed my forehead. Of course. Something nice and low-key, just us. I nodded. That sounded fine. A few days before, his sister texted that she and the cousins would be in town. Hope you don't mind if we pop in. I didn't mind. Not at first. I assumed we'd still find time, but the time never came. And that's when something shifted, not just in the house, in me. I used to think love meant making space. But now I understand. Not everyone deserves a room in your life just because they knock on the door. The week before my birthday was ordinary, in the kind of way that makes you let your guard down. I cleaned the front porch, made a fresh batch of vanilla candles, and even added flowers to the downstairs guest room. Some part of me, quiet, foolish, still hoped someone would remember. Even if it was just Mark. He came home Tuesday evening with takeout and an empty smile. I asked if we were still doing something for Friday, and he said, "Sure, just let me know what you're in the mood for. Maybe a nice movie night?" "Okay," I said. "Something low-key, just us." I meant it. I would have been happy with that. But then Thursday happened. I was in the kitchen organizing the spice drawer when I heard the front door open and slam. Footsteps, chatter, a woman's laugh I recognized. Sarah. "Oh, I love what you've done." "To the place," she called out, not even bothering to ask if she was welcome. Mark's 2 sisters, their husbands, 3 nieces, and even the dog. They all came sweeping in like a windstorm. Arms full of snacks, bags, wine bottles. No heads up, no text, just here. Mark leaned into the doorway, sheepish. They decided to come early, just for the weekend. "Hope it's okay?" I forced a smile. "Of course, just wish I'd known. We could have prepped more rooms." I started changing sheets and rearranging towels. I watched them pour drinks, claim couches, toss their shoes in corners. No one asked how I was. No one even said hello properly. Friday morning, my birthday, I woke up to the sound of laughter and the smell of cinnamon rolls. For a second, I thought, maybe, just maybe, they remembered. I came down in my robe, heart open like a child. In the kitchen, Liz was frosting a cake while Sarah arranged balloons. But it wasn't for me. Kevin, their cousin, had just landed a managerial role at a tech startup. "A little celebration," someone chirped. "He deserves it." I stood there silently, watching a pink frosted cake go into the fridge with "Congratulations," piped in cursive. No one looked at me. No one said a word. I went to the hall bathroom, locked the door, and stared at my reflection under bad lighting. I was 52, and once again invisible in a house that was supposed to be mine. When I came out, the dining room had been decorated. They were setting up plates and pouring Prosecco. "Hey, would you mind grabbing more napkins?" someone asked. Without eye contact. I walked to the guest bedroom instead, closed the door gently, opened the bottom drawer of my jewelry chest. Inside was a manila envelope I hadn't touched in over a year. The deed, tucked between old tax records and spare. Passport photos, my full name, my signature, my home. I sat on the bed and held it in my hands like something sacred. Not out of pride, but out of memory, out of self-preservation. When I came back out 20 minutes later, the party was in full swing. Music, laughter, Kevin holding court like royalty. Mark walked past me with a plate of cheese cubes and kissed my cheek absently. "You okay?" I nodded once. "Of course." I stood by the wall and watched them all raise their glasses. To Kevin, to new beginnings. I raised nothing. Later, while they took selfies on my staircase, I found Mark's phone charging in the mudroom. A message flashed across the screen. Family group chat. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. Liz. Let's not mention it's her birthday. She makes things weird. Sarah, she's so sensitive. We're just trying to have fun. Kevin, old people birthdays are depressing anyway, LOL. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I went back into the kitchen, grabbed the cupcakes I had made for myself the night before, lemon with cream cheese icing, and placed them in the fridge behind the leftovers. No one noticed. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I lit a single cupcake and sat by the sink. No song, no wish, just the soft flicker of a flame. That's when I made the decision. Not out of rage, not out of bitterness, out of clarity. They had mistaken my kindness for passivity, my silence for ignorance. But I wasn't the guest here. They were. The day they forgot me wasn't just my birthday. It was the day I remembered what power really looks like, and who owns the front. Dr. Key. They toasted Kevin 3 more times before the night was over. I kept waiting for someone, anyone, to turn, to say, "Wait, isn't it also your birthday?" But the words never came. The last toast of the night was Mark's. "To family," he said, lifting his glass high, "and to the future." The table clapped. I didn't. I just looked at him. He didn't look back. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. The house was quiet. I moved like a ghost through the kitchen, cleaning up their wine glasses and crumpled napkins. I scrubbed red frosting off my grandmother's antique tablecloth. No one had thought to ask before using it. By the time they started stirring, I was already dressed and out the door. I drove to the storage facility 10 miles out, the one I'd used before I bought the house. I paid for a new unit and bought 2 locks. It was the first step in a plan I wasn't yet ready to admit to myself. I came home to a war zone of cereal boxes, wet towels, and open toothpaste tubes. My niece once called this place museum clean. Now it felt like a frat house in heels. Mark was sitting on the front porch, coffee in hand. He looked up as I walked past. "You okay? You left early. I had errands. Everything all right?" I smiled. "Actually, everything's becoming very clear." He gave a half nod, like he didn't really hear me. "Well, Mom was thinking of staying another week, if that's cool." That was the moment, the click, the snap. "No," I said, calm, plain. "That's not cool." He blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean, it's time they left. Today. All of them." He scoffed. "Are you serious?" I didn't answer. I just walked inside, pulled the deed from the drawer, and placed it in front of him on the porch table. He stared at it like it was a foreign document. "What is this?" "You know what it is." He shifted. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because you need a reminder. This isn't your family's vacation home. It's my house. And they've disrespected me for the last time." "You're overreacting," he said, voice rising slightly. "No," I said. "I've been underreacting for years." He didn't know what to say. He just sat there blinking slowly, like someone whose chair had been pulled out from under him. Inside, his sisters were making pancakes with almond milk they found in my fridge. Kevin had the nerve to ask if we had any non-stick spray. I stood at the kitchen doorway and said, "You all need to pack your things by noon." Silence fell like thunder. Sarah laughed nervously. "Wait, what? You heard me. You have until noon." Mark stepped in, voice tight. "Babe, can we just talk privately?" "I think we've talked enough," I said. "In fact, I think we stopped really talking a long time ago." That afternoon, I started collecting the items that mattered most to me: photo albums, heirlooms, journals. I packed them in labeled bins and drove them to storage, one by one, quietly, systematically. At the lawyer's office later that week, I laid out everything: the deed, the mortgage documents, my will. He looked through the pages and said, "If you want to formally evict them, we can proceed." "I'm not pressing charges," I told him, "but I want the paperwork ready. I want boundaries set. He nodded. They have no legal claim. This is all in your name. Good. Back home, Mark tried to soften things. She didn't mean to forget your birthday, he said one evening, spooning soup into a bowl like that made up for everything. She didn't forget, Mark. She ignored it. There's a difference. She's just old school. She thinks birthdays are for kids. She brought a 3-layer cake for your 28-year-old cousin. Silence. I sat across from him and folded my hands. You know what hurts more than them forgetting me? I asked. You never remembered to defend me. He opened his mouth, closed it again. I stood, walked to the hallway closet, opened it slowly, and pulled out the suitcase I had set aside. Not for me, for him. Mark, I said, calm as a mother tucking in a child, you need to decide where your loyalty lies, because staying here means respecting me, and that includes how your family treats me. You're asking me to choose? No, I'm telling you what happens if you don't. I left him standing there, eyes glassy. He didn't follow me upstairs. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. The louder their laughter got, the quieter my patience became, until there was nothing left but the sound of the locks clicking shut, and my voice finally, firmly, saying, no more. The house felt different now, not quieter, emptier, like it had exhaled. They were still here, technically, but the atmosphere had shifted. My words had landed like a fault line. There were no more morning pancakes, no more group laughs echoing through the walls. Sarah and Liz kept to their rooms. Kevin left early the next morning, barely muttering goodbye. I didn't stop him. Mark tried to act like things were normal. He kept making small talk in the kitchen, kept touching my back in passing, but I wasn't his wife in those moments. I was something else now. I was awake. That night, I sat at the edge of the bed and opened the box I hadn't touched in years, the one labeled Old Life. Inside were photos from my 20s, smiling, wide-eyed, and wearing shoulder pads, cards from my first husband, mostly unsigned, a dried corsage from a high school dance, and underneath it all, a folded paper from my 40th birthday, a list I had written for myself. Things I still want to do before 50. Number 3. Throw myself a birthday party with all my favorite things. Number 6. Travel to the Amalfi Coast. Number 8. Be loved out loud, not in silence. I stared at the words. They felt like messages from a woman I'd abandoned. My mind wandered back to the last birthday before Mark. I had made a reservation at a small Thai restaurant. Solo. I wore red lipstick and brought a book I never opened. The waitress brought me a free dessert when she saw my birth date on the ID. I'd eaten the whole thing, slowly. No one texted me that day except a client and my sister. And yet I remember that birthday more vividly than the 5 since. Why? Because I chose it, I claimed it, however small. I realized then that I had stopped claiming things. Little things at first. My side of the bed. The shows I wanted to watch. The foods I liked. Even the way I spent my own time. Love had made me soft, but not in the warm, safe way. In the way that slowly erodes your edges until you're round enough to roll around someone else's comfort. The final crack came unexpectedly. A package arrived, no name on the return label. I opened it and found a pale blue gift bag inside. No card, just a single silver scarf and a tiny chocolate cake in a mason jar. I knew who it was from. Mrs. Edna, my neighbor 2 houses down. We used to garden together. She was 80 now and hard of hearing. I'd helped her fix her mailbox once. We hadn't spoken much in months. On the lid of the mason jar was a sticky note in trembling cursive. You told me once your birthday was in May. Thought you might need a little sweetness. I sat on the steps and cried. Not loud, not messy. Just the kind of quiet crying that takes your breath and gives it back a little clearer. Later that evening, I did something else. I pulled out the linen stationery I kept tucked in my office desk, Drawer. I wrote 5 letters, each one addressed and sealed. Mark, Sarah, Liz, Kevin, myself. Mark's said, "You loved me, but you loved keeping peace more. And sometimes that peace came at the cost of my dignity." Sarah's said, "You never had to like me, but you did have to respect me. You never even tried." Kevin said, "A house is more than walls. It's behavior. And yours was not welcome here." Liz's said, "I opened my home. You walked in like it was owed. It never was." Mine said, "You're not invisible. You never were. You just gave people the benefit of the doubt far too long. But now you remember who you are, and it's time they do too." The next morning I placed each letter where it belonged, neatly on the kitchen counter. Then I opened my laptop and booked an appointment with my attorney. This time not for consultation, for action. Have you ever been surrounded by people and still felt completely alone? Tell me what helped you find yourself again. I'd love to read your story. That evening, I drove out to the storage unit again. Only this time, it wasn't to drop off boxes. It was to breathe. I sat inside that little metal space, wrapped in that silver scarf from Edna, eating the tiny cake with a plastic fork. I looked around and realized something simple, something powerful. I didn't need to be celebrated by the wrong people. I just needed to stop letting them take up space. When the world went silent around me, I didn't fall apart. I wrote it all down, packed my piece, and started reclaiming the space they mistook for theirs. The weekend passed with a strange calm, too still, like the air before a summer storm. The house wasn't loud anymore, but it wasn't quiet in the way I liked either. It was the silence of held breath, of people waiting to see what I'd do next. I didn't rush. I made tea slowly, read the paper at the table, took my time folding, laundry and watering plants. They watched me closely, as if expecting me to snap, cry, scream, but I didn't. I moved through my days like someone with a plan, because I was someone with a plan. 2 days after the letters, Sarah and Liz left abruptly. No goodbyes, just the slam of car doors and suitcases thudding into trunks. I saw Liz mouthing something to Mark from the driveway, her arms crossed, her lips tight. He came back in, red-faced. She said, "You're overreacting." I smiled without humor. She's welcome to keep thinking that, just not under my roof. He didn't respond. I spent that afternoon with Diane, my old friend from work. We hadn't spoken in months, but she'd heard, through whispers at the neighborhood book club, that something had happened on my birthday. When I walked into the cafe, she stood up and hugged me tight. "I brought you a gift," she said, pulling a box from her tote. Inside was a small ceramic dish, hand-painted with the words, "May you never shrink to make others comfortable again." I nearly lost it, but I didn't. I just nodded and whispered, "Thank you." Over tea, I told her about everything, not just the birthday, but the years, the casual slights, the endless hosting, the shrinking. She didn't interrupt. She just listened. When I was done, she said, "Sometimes the most generous thing we can do is evict the wrong people from our peace." It landed in my chest like a sermon. Back at home, I started a quiet transformation. I took down the gallery wall of Mark's family photos in the hallway. One by one. I didn't break them. I didn't burn them. I wrapped them carefully and placed them in a box labeled, "Return to Sender." I replaced them with prints I had tucked away for years. Watercolors of Paris, the Amalfi Coast, a photo I took of a hawk mid-flight in Yosemite. It wasn't just decoration, it was declaration. This house was mine, and it was going to look like... Mark tried again the next day, this time with effort. He came home with a bouquet, half-wilted peonies from the gas station. "I know it's late," he said sheepishly, "but happy birthday." I took the bouquet gently, placed it in the sink, and began pulling off the browning petals. "It's not about flowers," I said quietly. "It never was." He looked confused, or maybe just afraid to admit he wasn't. "I'm tea." "Trying," he said. I know, I replied. But so am I, and trying now doesn't undo years of forgetting. He sank into the kitchen chair. I don't want to lose you, he said. I don't want to lose me either, I answered. That night, he slept in the guest room for the first time since we were married. I didn't lock the door, but I didn't open it either. The next morning, I pulled out the final set of documents from my lawyer. They weren't divorce papers, not yet. They were a written agreement, formalized, that acknowledged the house was mine and would remain solely mine. No member of Mark's family could stay without my written invitation. Any future cohabitation terms required mutual written consent. I handed them to Mark over coffee. What is this? He asked, scanning the paper. It's a boundary, a clear one. If you want to stay, we sign this. Together. He didn't speak for a long time. Finally, he looked up and asked, Do you still love me? I didn't rush my answer. I love you enough to want a future with you, but I love myself enough to never be erased again. So yes, if we're going to keep going, this is the cost of staying. He signed it. His hand trembled just slightly. That night, the house felt light. Not because everything was fixed, far from it, but because I had planted a flag in my own ground. Not as a threat, not from rage, but from truth. Later that week, I invited Diane and a few of the women from book club for wine on the patio. No pretense, just soft music, lavender candles, and laughter that didn't ask for permission. One of them, Claire, brought a cake. White chocolate raspberry, my favorite. It's late, she said, but not too late. They sang. I let them. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was on the outside of my own life. The moment I stopped waiting for others to make things right, I found peace, quiet, steady, and finally mine. The morning after the contract was signed, the house felt still, not peaceful, not yet, but paused, like something in midair, waiting to land. Mark had moved back into the master bedroom, not fully, just his clothes. He slept under the covers again, but far from me. There was no anger between us, just a silence that asked too. Many questions neither of us were ready to answer. Then the text started. It began with Sarah. So now we need a signed permission slip to visit our own brother. Then Liz chimed in. You're really proud of yourself, huh? Power trip much? I didn't reply. I'd already said what I needed to say. The house was mine. What they did with their bitterness was their own business now. But it didn't stop. There. Mark came home 2 days later, face pale, jaw clenched. They're posting things, he said. On Facebook. About you. I logged in. I never use Facebook anymore, but it was all right there. A thread filled with passive-aggressive jabs. Some women confuse property deeds with character. When a man marries a bank account, don't. Be surprised when the interest runs dry. Funny how family gets redefined when control is on the line. Photos of my house, taken without my knowledge, captioned, Where hospitality goes to die. They made me out to be cold, controlling, calculated. No one mentioned the forgotten birthdays, the years of effort, the countless meals. Just a woman who finally said no and dared to mean it. Mark hovered in the kitchen while I read. I told them to stop, he muttered. They just don't understand. They think you're kicking them out of my life. I turned to him, slow and measured. I didn't kick anyone out. I just locked the doors they were never invited through to begin with. He opened his mouth, then closed it, because deep down, he knew. This wasn't new. It had always been like this. He just hadn't had to face it until now. That weekend, his mother called. He answered in the other room, but I could hear her voice rise even through the walls. She wants to humiliate us. You're just letting her do this? She's destroying everything we built with you. Everything we built. I smiled to myself, not bitter, just resolved. When he hung up, he came to me slowly. She wants to come talk. Here? Yes. I waited a moment, then nodded. Tell her she gets 10 minutes. She arrived 2 days later. Pearls, mauve lipstick, holding a pie like it was armor. We sat across from each other at the dining table. I didn't offer tea. She cleared her throat. I just want to understand what's happening. Good, I said. Then let me be clear. I slid a small printed paper across the table, a laminated copy of the property deed. My name, my house, my rules. You and your family forgot my birthday. You forgot my presence. But more than that, you dismissed me in my own home. That won't happen again. She shifted. It was a misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding, I interrupted. It was a pattern, and I'm breaking it. She looked wounded. I've always tried to be polite. You've always tried to be dominant, I replied calmly. You didn't want a daughter-in-law. You wanted a quiet hostess. And I was that for too long, she blinked. And now you want to punish us. No, I said, folding my hands. I want peace, and your presence disturbs it. She stood up, slowly, pie untouched. I suppose I'm no longer welcome. I nodded once. Not until you treat me like I am. Mark and I didn't speak much that evening. He paced, picked up things, put them back down. Eventually, he stood in the doorway of our bedroom and said, They think I've chosen you over them. I looked up from my book. Have you? He didn't answer right away. I don't know how to be in the middle, he finally said. You're not in the middle, I said. You're just standing between two doors, and eventually you'll have to walk through one. He left the room. I didn't follow. 2 days later, I woke to find him gone. His closet was half empty. His suitcase, missing. A note on the kitchen counter, next to the pie his mother had left behind. I need space. I'm staying at the Hyatt for a while. Maybe you're right. Maybe I've let this go on too long. But I don't know who I am in this version of us. I read the words twice, folded the note, placed it in a drawer. Then I cut a slice of that pie. Sat on the porch. Mark came by the next day. He had flowers, not from the gas station this time. A real bouquet, thoughtful, wildflowers and eucalyptus, my favorites. He walked through the gate, slow and measured. I didn't want to intrude yesterday, he said. But happy birthday. I smiled. Thank you. I'm proud of you, he added. I studied him. He wasn't asking for re-entry anymore. He was just honoring the perimeter, and that, finally, was enough. Have you ever reclaimed your space, your home, your peace, your sense of self, after being pushed to the side? I'd love to hear how you did it. Share in the comments below. Later that night, I stood barefoot in the kitchen, icing a slice of leftover cake, and thought about how far I'd come. This house was no longer the backdrop for someone else's narrative. It was mine. Not just in deed, but in energy, in spirit, in memory. I walked room to room, touching the corners, flipping light switches like someone blessing the walls. There had been grief here, frustration, heartbreak, but there was also quiet victory, and that made every inch sacred. They forgot my birthday, but I remembered my worth. And now, every door in this house opens to a woman no one will ever overlook. Again. People assume the hardest part is the confrontation. The moment you say, enough, the line you draw, the door you close. But that's not true. The hardest part is the quiet after. The morning you wake up and realize you're not who you were, and not yet who you're becoming. It's standing in your own kitchen, holding your own coffee mug, and asking yourself, now what? That's where I lived for a while. In that quiet space between endings and beginnings. And in that space, I learned something no one ever taught me growing up. You don't need permission to matter. I used to think being a good wife meant being agreeable. A good host meant being invisible. A good woman meant sacrificing comfort so others could stretch their legs. But when my birthday came and went without a glance, when I watched people pass cake and wine and not even remember the woman who paid for the roof over their heads. Something ancient inside me woke up. Not anger, not revenge, just truth. And once you start telling yourself the truth, you can't unhear it. I've learned that dignity doesn't arrive with noise. It arrives with restraint. It's choosing to walk away instead of explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. It's holding a boundary without raising your voice. It's remembering your worth without needing them to. Mark and I are still finding our rhythm. Some weeks he visits, some he doesn't. There's no grand reconciliation story here, only slow steps, careful ones. We're not building back. We're building differently. But whether he returns fully or not, I know I'll be okay, because I no longer wait for someone to remember me in order to feel real. I remember myself every day. I travel now. Small trips for now, but each one feels like a note in a song I thought I'd forgotten. I journal. I walk. I rest without guilt. And when I meet women, especially the ones who smile too easily at their own exhaustion, I want to take their hands and say, "You can stop shrinking now. You're allowed to take up space." I've also realized that home isn't just about ownership. It's about energy, about who feels safe here, about the rules we enforce, not for control, but for peace. And peace, I've learned, is a full-time job. It requires clarity, boundaries, and sometimes letting go of who you thought would stand beside you forever. If you're listening to this and you've been made small in your own home, know this: you are not crazy. You are not overreacting. You are not too sensitive. You are waking up, and once you wake up, the world can never put you back to sleep. I still keep the deed in the drawer, not out of pride, but as a reminder. I own more than a house. I own my voice, my presence, my future, and that's something no one will forget again. Not because I'll demand it, but because I'll live it. Every room, every choice, every inch of me, fully present, fully here. They forgot me once, but I remembered myself forever, and that changed everything. And ate it in silence, because I didn't need him to stay for me to feel whole. When the man I loved walked out, I didn't chase him. I opened the windows, let in the breeze, and remembered that sometimes losing people is how we regain ourselves. It's strange how silence can become a companion, not the kind that fills a room awkwardly, but the kind that gently puts a hand on your back and says, "You're okay now. You don't need to explain anymore." That's what the house felt like after Mark left. I thought I might fall apart. I didn't. I thought I might miss the rhythm of his footsteps upstairs. I didn't. Instead, I cleaned the baseboards, reorganized the pantry, donated the box of guest linens I had kept for his family. For the first time in years, I woke up and didn't brace myself for intrusion. The days passed. He called once, then again. Left a voicemail that started with, "Hey, just checking in," and ended with, "I miss you." I didn't call back, not out of spite, but because I needed space too. Real space. Not the kind he'd taken with his suitcase, but the kind I was finally claiming with both hands. I had dinner alone in the garden, with candles flickering in mason jars. I pulled the outdoor furniture cushions out of storage, hosed them down, and made the patio into something lovely, something mine. The following weekend, I hosted my book club. 6 women, older, wiser, beautifully weathered. We drank wine, passed around lemon cookies, and talked about everything except husbands. Claire brought me a belated birthday gift, a gold-foiled journal with a single quote embossed on the cover. She remembered who she was, and the game changed. That night, I pulled out my old travel folder. I'd made it years ago. Tabs for dream destinations, tucked away places I used to imagine visiting when I thought life had room for dreams. Venice, Kyoto, Santa Fe, and Amalfi. Always Amalfi. It felt like a fantasy back then. Like a place women went in movies, not real life. But now, why not? I called a travel agent the next morning. No hesitation, no guilt. By noon, I had a ticket booked for late summer, 1 week on the coast, a small hotel with a balcony, no shared. Schedules, no compromises, just me. When I got the confirmation email, I sat on the floor and cried. Not because I was sad, because it felt like a new breath after years underwater. A few days later, Mark came back, unannounced. I was pruning my lavender bush when I heard the crunch of gravel and the soft click of the gate. He stood there, unsure, hands in his pockets, suitcase still in the trunk. "Hi," he said gently. I wiped my hands on a towel. "You're early. I didn't expect you." I wanted to talk. I nodded once. Then talk. He followed me to the porch, sat where my book club had gathered just days before. "I've been staying at the Hyatt, thinking, a lot." Nodded again, letting the silence do the work. "I read the agreement again," he continued. "I signed it so fast, I didn't really understand what it meant." "And now?" "And now I do," he said. "It means you finally stopped making space for people who never made any for you." His voice cracked slightly. "I'm sorry. You know, for all of it, for not seeing it, for letting them treat you like a hostess instead of a wife." I watched him. He looked smaller somehow, not defeated, but changed. "I think," he said slowly, "I've always wanted to keep the peace, even if it meant letting you carry the weight." "That's exactly what you did," I said, "and you left me exhausted in the home I built." He looked down. "I can't come back," he said. "Not unless it's different. Not unless I'm different." I didn't rush my response. "I don't need grand gestures, Mark. I just need truth, boundaries, and respect that doesn't disappear when your family walks through the door." He nodded. "Then I'd like to earn my way back. Not with promises, but with proof." I looked at him for a long moment. Then I said, "Start by unpacking the truth before you unpack your suitcase." He smiled, a small, sad, hopeful thing. That evening, he didn't move back in. But he stayed on the porch, sipping tea I brought him, both of us wrapped in quiet understanding. He didn't ask for forgiveness, and I didn't offer it, not yet, but something shifted, something real. 2 days later, I mailed back the box of family photos, no note, just a return address and a tracking number. I took down the last relic of their presence, a small wall cross Sarah had hung in the hallway without asking. I replaced it with a framed quote, "My home is a reflection of my peace, not your expectations." I walked through the house and breathed it in. This was no longer the stage for someone else's comfort. This was a sanctuary. Mine. He finally knocked. Not as a husband demanding space, but as a man asking to rebuild trust. And this time, I didn't say yes. I said, "Show me." Mark didn't move back in that week, or even the one after, and I didn't ask when he would. That wasn't the rhythm anymore. Instead, we began again in small, deliberate steps. He would visit for dinner, sometimes bring dessert. He'd text before arriving, "Is tonight still okay?" There was no assumption in his tone, no automatic entry, just effort. Real, visible effort. And I noticed things. He listened more. Interrupted. Less. He'd wipe down the counter after himself, ask before inviting anyone to stop by, and never mentioned us like it was a given. It was something to earn now, not inherit. One night, over grilled salmon and steamed broccoli, he looked across the table and said, "I had to ask myself who I am without them, without their voices in my head." I nodded slowly. "And what did you find?" He looked down at his plate for a moment. "I found that I liked being needed by them. I liked being the hero in their chaos. But I forgot that while I was saving them from themselves, I was letting them drown you. He paused. I'm sorry. I studied him. Not for his words, but for the way he waited after them. I accept your apology, I said gently. But I don't owe you my trust. Not right away. I know. He meant it. Around the same time, something else happened. I ran into Sarah at the grocery store. She was at the end of the cereal aisle, sunglasses on indoors, holding her phone like a shield. When she saw me, she froze. I didn't. I kept walking, right past her, slow and calm. She said nothing, not even a mutter, because she knew. No yelling, no confrontation, just absence. Sometimes the loudest goodbye is simply not speaking. Later that week, a message came from an unexpected place. Mark's niece, Amanda. Auntie, can I still call you that? I know I was quiet during all the stuff that happened, but I saw it. I saw how they treated you. I didn't know how to speak up then, but I'm in therapy now, and I wanted to say thank you. You showed me what boundaries look like. I ended things. With my boyfriend. He was controlling. I think I learned what strength looks like watching you. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed, yes, you can still call me Auntie, and I'm proud of you. Summer rolled in slowly, like warm honey on a window pane. I spent mornings on the porch with iced coffee, journaling again. I made an effort to celebrate myself more deliberately. Each week, I bought fresh flowers, wore the good earrings just because, played jazz in the kitchen while I cleaned. It was no longer about proving I mattered to others. It was about remembering. I mattered to myself. Then came my birthday, again. A full year since that night, they forgot. But this time, I remembered everything. I planned a small dinner in the garden. Just me, Diane, Claire, and a few chosen women who'd become sisters of the soul. We wore linen and wide-brimmed hats, sipped chilled wine under fairy lights, and told stories we never had time to tell before. There was laughter, there was music, there was a cake, white chocolate raspberry just like last year, but this time with words written in gold to the woman who remembered herself. I lit the candle, took a photo, closed my eyes. Didn't make a wish, because for the first time in my adult life, I didn't need anything more.